The forest was alive with shadows as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, and silence spread across the land. From the thick canopy, a figure emerged with power in every step. Its long spine rose like jagged peaks, and its jaws gleamed with sharp death. The ground trembled beneath its weight, and smaller creatures scattered before the beast. This was no ordinary predator. It was a ruler of its time, and nothing dared stand in its way. The Acrocanthosaurus moved with a hunger that could never be satisfied, and the world would soon learn the cost of crossing its path. The land was a place of endless survival. Vast forests stretched toward the horizon, broken only by rivers that twisted like silver snakes through the soil. Towering conifers loomed overhead, their shadows falling across ferns and cycads that carpeted the forest floor. The air was heavy with warmth, thick with the hum of insects and the calls of distant reptiles. Each creature fought for its place in this ancient world, where strength meant life and weakness meant death. Among the many predators that stalked the Cretaceous wilderness, one hunter towered above the rest, both in size and in reputation. Its name was Acrocanthosaurus. The beast was unlike any other that prowled the land. Its body stretched nearly 12 meters long, and every muscle beneath its scaled hide told a story of raw power. Yet what set it apart from others was the great sail that rose along its back. The high spines along its vertebrae formed a ridge that loomed like the jagged edge of a mountain. When it moved through the shadows, the sail caught the light in flashes that made the creature seem larger than life. To prey, this display was a warning. To rivals, it was a threat. Acrocanthosaurus was not only large, it was clever. Its eyes burned with an alertness that searched both near and far. The forests it ruled were not empty. Herds of long-necked sauropods wandered slowly across the land, pulling branches from trees like living towers of flesh and bone. Faster prey, such as ornithopods, darted through the undergrowth in bursts of speed and sound. These animals were not easy meals. They watched, they listened, and they moved together. Only a predator with both cunning and patience could hope to bring them down. This was the path that shaped Acrocanthosaurus into the tyrant of its time. Every step of its existence was bound to the struggle for dominance. The rivers provided water, but also brought competition. Crocodile-like hunters lurked at the edges, and smaller theropods stalked the shadows waiting for scraps. Even the skies above were alive with danger, as great pterosaurs wheeled in the air searching for carrion. To rule such a place demanded more than teeth and claws. It required a will that could not bend. The Acrocanthosaurus had that will. It had grown to adulthood not by chance, but by endless battles and victories that marked its hide with scars like medals of survival. The dawn of each day was another test. At sunrise, the forest stirred with sound and motion. The giant hunter rose from its resting place near the edge of a clearing and shook loose the soil and leaves that clung to its body. Its nostrils flared and caught the drifting scent of prey. Hunger guided it forward, driving its heavy frame through the trees with surprising grace. It was not reckless. Every movement had purpose. Its tail swung like a balancing rod as it stepped with silence that defied its size. Where smaller predators would rush headlong, Acrocanthosaurus stalked with patience that chilled the very air. The Cretaceous world had many hunters, but none could match the balance of strength and skill that this predator possessed. It was not the fastest nor the largest, but it was one of the most relentless. Its jaws could crush bone, and its bite could end a struggle in moments. The sail upon its back may have even been a tool for display, drawing mates or warding rivals with the imposing shadow it cast. Whatever its purpose, the feature gave Acrocanthosaurus a silhouette that no other beast could mistake. To see it was to know fear. As the day unfolded and the forest stretched toward the light, the predator continued its march. Life thrived in every corner of the land, but so too did death. That was the law that ruled. The Acrocanthosaurus knew no other truth. To live meant to hunt, and to hunt meant to kill. It was a cycle older than the rivers and deeper than the roots of the forest itself. And so the giant carried on, master of a world where only the strongest survived, yet always tested by the chaos of an age that never stood still. The morning sun pierced through the trees, casting golden light across the forest floor. Acrocanthosaurus moved with calm precision, its massive feet pressing into the soil with each careful step. It was a hunter's morning, the kind when the air carried scents far and clear. A faint breeze rolled across the land, pulling the aroma of living flesh toward its nostrils. It stopped, tilted its head, and inhaled again. The smell was not faint. It was strong. Nearby, prey gathered. From the edge of a clearing, the giant predator crouched low, its eyes narrowing on the scene before it. A herd of sauropods lumbered along the riverbank, their long necks stretched high, stripping branches of leaves while their tails swayed lazily in rhythm. Beside them, smaller dinosaurs, fast-moving ornithopods, darted around in groups feeding on low vegetation. Together they created a picture of life and abundance. For Acrocanthosaurus, they were the promise of survival. Hunger gnawed at its belly like fire, and instinct demanded that it act. But there was a problem. The herd was not unguarded. At the far side of the river stood another predator. A pair of smaller theropods lingered at the water's edge. They were not as large as Acrocanthosaurus, but their sharp eyes were fixed on the same herd. The forest bounty was never enough for all, and competition was as fierce as teeth themselves. If Acrocanthosaurus failed to claim its place now, the chance of feeding could slip away. The giant's muscles tensed, but it did not rush. It studied the ground, the wind, and the herd's movements. The sauropods were strong, too strong for a direct assault. Even with its powerful jaws, Acrocanthosaurus would risk grave injury against their whipping tails. The ornithopods, however, offered another path. They were smaller, quicker, but not impossible to capture if the strike was precise. Strategy filled the predator's mind. It would need patience, timing, and above all, an opening. Minutes stretched into long moments as the predator crept closer. Each step was deliberate, its weight balanced to avoid snapping branches. The herd shifted as it grazed, and soon the opportunity arrived. A cluster of ornithopods had drifted away from the safety of the larger animals. They picked at ferns near the water's edge, unaware of the shadow that lurked in the trees. Acrocanthosaurus inhaled deeply, filling its chest with air, its eyes fixed on the chosen target. Hunger burned through its veins, pushing it forward. Then the forest erupted. With a roar that shook the air, the predator burst from cover. Birds scattered into the sky, and the ground shook as its feet pounded the earth. The ornithopods shrieked in alarm, scattering in every direction. One unfortunate straggler froze for a moment too long. Acrocanthosaurus lunged, jaws snapping shut around its prey with bone-shattering force. The animal screamed briefly before silence fell. Blood stained the soil, and the forest was alive with chaos. The herd bellowed. Sauropods trumpeted, and the smaller theropods on the opposite riverbank gave angry cries at the kill being stolen before their eyes. Yet triumph was not without risk. As Acrocanthosaurus stood over its struggling meal, the rival predators began to move. Their calls grew louder, circling closer, drawn by hunger and fury. They wanted to kill and would fight to claim it. Suddenly the air thickened with tension. What started as a hunt for food now teetered on the edge of something greater. Acrocanthosaurus lowered its head, nostrils flaring as it growled a warning. Its sail loomed high in the sunlight, a towering banner of defiance. The rivals paused, weighing their options. This was no ordinary predator. To challenge it meant risking everything. The river bubbled beside them. The herd thundered away into safety, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The first true clash of dominance had begun. Hunger had drawn the beast from its shadows, but now it faced more than a meal. It faced a battle that would decide whether it ruled or fell, whether the sail on its back was a mark of fear or just another shadow in a dangerous world. The forest no longer felt calm. The moment the first kill had been made, silence had vanished, replaced by the cries of beasts, the thunder of retreating herds, and the snarl of predators circling in hunger. Acrocanthosaurus stood tall over the ornithopod carcass, its heavy chest rising and falling as it caught its breath. Blood still dripped from its jaws, soaking into the soil, yet the victory was already under threat. The rival theropods, smaller but faster, had moved closer. Their bright eyes glimmered with determination, their feet splashing in the shallow water of the river as they hissed. Acrocanthosaurus did not back away. It lowered its head and arched the sail of its back in full display. The sunlight lit the ridge of spines like a crimson banner, making its size even more intimidating. The rivals paused but did not retreat. They barked and screeched, pacing from side to side as if testing for weakness. One darted forward a few steps, snapping its jaws in the air before leaping back. They were not ready to engage directly. Not yet. The giant knew their strategy. They hoped to exhaust it, to wait until the larger predator dropped its guard, then rush in and tear away the prize. But hunger had sharpened Acrocanthosaurus far more than they realized. It gave a deep growl that rolled like thunder across the clearing. Then, with sudden force, it lunged forward. Its massive foot crashed into the mud with a spray of water. Its jaws snapped dangerously close to one of the rivals. The smaller predator shrieked in shock, stumbling back into the river. The other gave a warning cry, and together they retreated several lengths down the bank. For now, the kill remained secured. Yet Acrocanthosaurus did not feel calm. It had eaten, yes, but only a fraction of what it needed. One ornithopod could not sustain a predator of its size for long. The rivals would not forget this defeat either. They would trail it, waiting for weakness, perhaps even call upon others of their kind. Worse still, the scent of blood carried through the forest. Any predator within range would smell the fresh kill and come seeking. The hunt had not ended. It had only opened the door to greater conflict. The giant predator bent down, tearing at the carcass, swallowing chunks of flesh and bone. Each bite renewed its strength, but instinct kept its head lifting every few moments, eyes scanning the trees. Shadows seemed to move where there were none. The forest spoke in whispers of danger. The river, once a source of calm, now glimmered with unease. Even the birds in the canopy above had fled. When it had taken what it could, Acrocanthosaurus left the remains and moved deeper into the forest. Each step was heavy but deliberate. The sail on its back brushed low branches as it passed, scattering insects and lizards. Hunger was eased, but only slightly. A true feast would be required soon. It could not afford to linger near the river, where others prowled. The days stretched onward. Acrocanthosaurus followed the scent of life through thickets of fern and dense undergrowth. The forest changed as it moved farther from the water. The air grew stiller, thicker, heavy with heat. Shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy, but below, the world was dim and green. The ground trembled faintly. Somewhere ahead, large creatures moved. It followed the vibrations until the trees opened into another clearing. There, grazing on cycads and low shrubs, was a herd of hadrosaurs. Their duck-billed faces swung back and forth as they pulled leaves into their mouths, their tails swaying in steady rhythm. Their calls rose and fell, a low chorus that filled the air like distant horns. Acrocanthosaurus sank low to ground, its massive form pressing close to the earth. This was no reckless rush as with the ornithopods. This was a chance for something greater. A hadrosaur could feed it for days. But the herd was alert. Dozens of eyes watched the edges of the clearing. Any misstep would send them thundering into safety. Patience was required. The predator circled, finding the wind, letting the scent of the herd drift toward it without giving away its own. Slowly, carefully, it edged closer. A juvenile had wandered near the back of the group, smaller than the adults and less guarded. The giant predator fixed its eyes on the target. Muscles coiled beneath its skin, each breath steady but charged with focus. Suddenly, a branch snapped beneath its weight. The sound was small but sharp. The herd froze. Heads lifted, eyes widened. A moment of still silence stretched across the clearing. Then chaos. The hadrosaurs trumpeted an alarm, and the herd broke into motion. Dust rose as dozens of feet pounded the ground. The forest roared with their escape. But Acrocanthosaurus was already moving. It exploded from cover with terrifying speed for its size. The ground shook under its charge. Its jaws opened wide, teeth flashing as it closed on the fleeing juvenile. The young hadrosaur screamed, stumbling as it tried to match the pace of the herd. Too slow, Acrocanthosaurus lunged, teeth clamping down on its flank. Flesh tore. The prey shrieked in agony, kicking wildly, but the predator dragged it down. A thunderous crash of bodies hit the earth. Blood sprayed across the leaves. The herd fled into the distance, their calls fading into echoes. The forest fell quiet again, save for the struggle of predator and prey. It ended swiftly. The hadrosaur fell limp, and Acrocanthosaurus stood victorious, its chest heaving, its jaws soaked red. The feast began. This kill was larger, richer. The giant predator ripped flesh free, swallowing great mouthfuls that filled its belly at last. The taste of victory was sharp, but even as it fed, it sensed the danger that always followed. The smell of blood was a beacon. Already, the forest stirred. A rustle of leaves to the north. A cry in the distance. The predator lifted its head, jaws dripping, eyes scanning. It was not alone. Shadows shifted at the edge of the clearing, and a low growl answered its triumph. From the darkness stepped another challenger. Not the smaller rivals from the river, but something greater. Another Acrocanthosaurus. The sight struck like thunder. This was no scavenger, no opportunistic hunter. This was a mirror image of itself, tall, powerful, with the same sail rising along its back. Its eyes locked onto the carcass, then onto its rival. The forest was not large enough for two predators of such size. The kill was more than food. It was a claim to dominance. The two giants circled, growling, tails lashing against the ground. Birds scattered into the air, insects fled, and smaller creatures vanished into burrows. The forest seemed to shrink under the weight of their presence. Every muscle tensed, every step pressed into the earth like thunder. Then, in a blur of movement, the clash began. The rival lunged first, jaws snapping toward the shoulder. Acrocanthosaurus twisted, deflecting the strike with a swing of its massive head. Teeth scraped against scale, leaving shallow gashes. The predator roared, countering with a powerful shove. Their bodies slammed together, shaking the ground. The sound was deafening, the force immense. They struck again and again. Jaws clamped, tails whipped, claws tore at flanks. Dust rose around them, and the clearing became a storm of fury. Blood splattered the leaves, splashing across their massive forms. Each attack carried the risk of ending everything. One misstep, one failed defense, and the victor would rise while the other fell silent forever. The ground shook beneath their weight as two titans collided again. Their roar split the forest like thunder, echoing across the canopy, sending flocks of birds into the air. The rival Acrocanthosaurus lunged forward with teeth bared, its jaws clamping down on the shoulder of the first. The sound of tearing flesh filled the clearing. Pain flared hot, but the wounded predator did not yield. With a violent twist of its massive head, it tore itself free, leaving blood streaming down at hide. Both combatants circled, eyes locked, breath ragged. Their sails rose like banners of war, glowing red in the filtered sunlight. They struck again, bodies slamming together with earth-shaking force. Dust spiraled upward as their tails whipped the ground. The challenger pressed forward with relentless aggression. Its strikes came fast, snapping jaws seeking the throat, claws raking against the flanks. Each attack tested the endurance of the defender, each strike a reminder of how evenly matched they were. The victor would not be decided by size or strength alone. It would be decided by cunning. Acrocanthosaurus knew this. It feinted left, then swung its heavy tail like a club. The impact cracked against the rival's ribs with a thundering smack, driving it sideways into the carcass of the fallen hadrosaur. Flesh split under the collision. The rival stumbled, stunned, but quickly recovered with a savage counter. Its jaws clamped around the predator's leg, teeth slicing deep. The giant roared in agony, thrashing wildly. Blood poured down into the dirt. For a moment, it seemed the end had come. The rival's grip tightened, dragging its enemy lower. The forest rang with desperate cries as the massive predator fought against the crushing bite. Muscles bunched, claws raked, tail lashed, yet still the teeth held firm. The air filled with a coppery scent of blood and the frantic struggle of survival. Then instinct struck like lightning. The wounded Acrocanthosaurus twisted its body with all its strength, rolling sideways. The move tore more flesh from its leg, but also broke the rival's grip. The predator fell heavily onto its side, mud splashing high. But in that instant, its jaws found opportunity. Teeth clamped hard onto the rival's neck. The rival bellowed in fury and panic, thrashing to break free. Their bodies churned the clearing into chaos. Trees splintered, earth ripped, carcass crushed beneath the storm of their battle. But the hold was secure. Acrocanthosaurus dug its claws into the ground, anchoring itself, jaws tightening around the rival's throat. Blood surged, spraying across scales and soil. The rival struck back savagely, slamming its body against the predator's flank, biting, clawing, struggling to breathe. Its sail shuddered as muscles strained. Yet every second, the grip grew deeper, stronger. The forest seemed to pause. The sounds of insects, birds, even the wind fell silent, as though all life held its breath to witness the deciding moment. With one last surge of primal power, Acrocanthosaurus crushed down. The rival gave a final convulsive thrash, claws raking shallow cuts before its strength gave out. A guttural cry escaped its throat, breaking into silence as its body went limp. The victor held on a moment longer, ensuring the end was absolute. Then, slowly, it released, stepping back on trembling legs. Its chest heaved, blood dripping from its jaws, its own wounds burning with pain. The rival lay motionless, sprawled across the trampled clearing, its sail collapsing into the mud. Victory had been won, but at a terrible cost. Acrocanthosaurus staggered, its injured leg nearly giving way. The earth around it was painted red, a mix of blood from both titans. It stood over the fallen rival, roaring one final time. The sound shook the forest to its core, a cry of triumph and survival that echoed for miles. It was not just a claim to the kill, but a proclamation to all creatures within earshot. This territory belonged to it, and it alone. Silence followed. The waves of sound faded, and the predator stood still, catching its breath. Pain coursed through its body, but beneath the exhaustion was an undeniable truth. It had survived. It had defeated its equal. The hadrosaur carcass still lay nearby, battered and torn from the struggle. Slowly, limping but resolute, Acrocanthosaurus returned to the prize. Hunger gnawed once more, and with great effort, it began to feed. Each bite was slower now, its strength drained, but the meat brought renewal. The forest, cautious at first, resumed its life. Distant calls of smaller creatures rose once more. Insects buzzed back to their feast on blood-soaked soil. The river beyond the trees flowed calmly, as though the world had not just shaken with the clash of giants. But for the victor, everything had changed. It was now the true ruler of this land. The scars across its body told the story of the battle. The torn leg, the gashes along its flanks, the blood still dripping from its hide, all were marks of survival, symbols of dominance. Above, the sun broke through the canopy, striking the sail on its back. The crimson glow returned, brighter now, casting the predator in fiery light. Its shadow stretched long across the trampled clearing, a silhouette of power. The age of the Acrocanthosaurus had been sealed. The clearing was silent, except for the labored breaths of the victor. Acrocanthosaurus stood hunched over the remains of the rival, its body trembling from exertion. Every wound throbbed with fire. The torn flesh on its leg made each step unsteady, and its flanks burned where claws had raked deep. Yet even as pain coursed through its body, there was no mistaking the truth. The predator still stood, and the rival would never rise again. Slowly, it limped away from the corpse of its fallen equal and toward the hadrosaur carcass. The kill that had sparked the conflict was still there, though battered and half-crushed by the violence of their battle. The air around it was thick with the iron scent of blood and the sickly sweetness of open entrails. Flies already swarmed, eager to take advantage of what the giants had left behind. With heavy jaws, Acrocanthosaurus tore into the flesh, ignoring the ache in its body. Each bite was slow, but each mouthful gave back the strength it had lost. Warm meat slid down its throat, easing the hunger that had driven it to defend the carcass so ferociously. For a while, it fed without pause, head rising and lowering like a great machine. The forest, disturbed by the thunder of the clash, now returned to life. The chirping of insects filled the still air. Birds darted nervously among the branches again, calling softly as though wary of stirring the beast below. In the distance, the faint crash of a falling tree echoed where their fight had torn to the forest floor. Nature was already healing around the scars of their duel. But for the Acrocanthosaurus, healing would take longer. Its left leg trembled with every movement. The punctures in the rival's teeth were deep, bleeding sluggishly despite the mud caked to the wounds. Each step felt unstable, and it knew the injury would slow it for days. Weakness was dangerous in this land. It paused in its feeding and raised its head high, scanning the edges of the clearing. Smaller scavengers had gathered, watching with hungry eyes but keeping their distance. Raptors crouched in the undergrowth, and primitive mammals lurked among the roots. None dared approach while the giant lived, but the Acrocanthosaurus knew what would happen if it fell. The wild was merciless. The predator released a low growl, more a warning than a roar. The sound rolled through the trees, enough to keep the scavengers at bay. For now, turning back to the hadrosaur, it tore more meat, its jaws working slower now as exhaustion spread deeper through its body. The weight of the battle pressed down on it. Every scar on its hide throbbed in rhythm with its heartbeat. Each swallow of food seemed harder than the last, yet there was determination in its eyes. It had fought for this, and it would not give up the reward. As the sun dipped lower, the golden light streamed to the canopy and caught on the predator's sail. The ragged edges of its wounds glistened wetly, but the tall ridge of bone and muscle still rose proudly, even battered and bloodied. The predator's sail stood like a banner of survival. When it finally stepped back on the carcass, its belly heavy with food, the forest seemed to settle into calm. The rival's body lay still, a reminder of how fragile dominance could be. One day, another challenger might come, but not today. With slow, deliberate steps, Acrocanthosaurus moved toward the shade at the edge of the clearing. It lowered its massive body into dirt, resting at last. The soil was cool against its wounds, and the rhythmic crash of the river beyond soothed its weary form. The battle was over. The kill was claimed. For now, at least, this land was secure. Dawn returned to the land with a pale silver glow spreading across the horizon. The storm of violence had passed. The clearing bore scars of the struggle. Gouges in the soil where claws had raked, broken branches where massive bodies had crashed, and the still remains of the fallen rival already picked up by scavengers in the night. Nature wasted nothing. The Acrocanthosaurus rose slowly from where it had rested. Its body still ached, every wound pulling at its flesh as it moved, but its belly was heavy with food, and its strength was beginning to return. It stood tall again, though not without a limp, and its sail cut the morning light like the fin of a ship rising above dark waters. It stepped back into the clearing and surveyed the scene. The hadrosaur carcass was nearly stripped, but what little remained still belonged to the victor. Smaller predators scattered as it approached, their feast interrupted by the rumble of the giant's steps. Raptors hissed, but quickly melted into the shadows, and the mammals vanished beneath the roots of nearby trees. The forest belonged to the strongest, and no creature doubted who had earned that right. The Acrocanthosaurus tore the last strips of flesh from bone, swallowing with steady determination. When it finished, it let out a deep breath, a sound almost like a sigh, and turned toward the river. The water shimmered in the morning sun, carrying away fallen leaves and broken branches. Slowly, carefully, the predator lowered its head and drank. Each gulp of cool water soothed its throat and washed away the metallic taste of blood. The reflection in the water revealed a creature battered but unbroken. The great ridge of its back was scarred but still proud. Its jaws bore fresh cracks and its flanks carried new wounds, but its eyes remained sharp and alive. In that reflection was proof of survival. It lingered by the river for a time, letting the current wash over its wounds. Mud and blood swirled away into the depths, erasing the signs of battle, as though the earth itself wished to heal its champion. The coolness dulled the pain, and with each passing moment, strength began to return to tired limbs. The forest, too, had begun to recover. Insects hummed in growing numbers, and birds called from the canopy. Herds of smaller plant eaters ventured cautiously at the edge of the trees, drawn by the safety that followed the predator's victory. The balance of life continued as it always had. Kill and be killed, survive or be forgotten. Acrocanthosaurus raised its head and released a roar that split the morning air. The sound carried across the forest, echoing against cliffs and flowing over the river. It was not a call for battle, but a declaration. The territory was secure. The rival was gone. The Acrocanthosaurus still reigned, exhausted yet victorious. It turned away from the river and began its slow march deeper into its domain. Each step left a print in the soft soil, wide and deep, a reminder to all who cross its path. The forest swallowed its form as it disappeared into the green shadows. The rhythm of its stride steady despite the limp. The battle had cost it blood and pain, but it had also brought renewal. With its belly full, its dominance unchallenged, and its spirit unbroken, the predator carried on. It had survived the test of strength. And in the world of giants, survival was the only true victory. The sun climbed higher, bathing the land in golden light. Birds wheeled overhead, rivers sparkled, and the forest hummed with life. Somewhere in the distance, herds of prey grazed, unaware of what fate might bring when the shadow of the predator returned. For now, Acrocanthosaurus moved on, scarred yet eternal, its place in the world secure. The forest would remember the clash. The land would bear its scars. But for the Acrocanthosaurus, the story was simple. It had fought, it had endured, and it had triumphed. In the timeless rhythm of life and death, it remained master of its world.